Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent over a really intriguing stack of articles and research on behavioral economics and choice architecture. So, we're diving deep into how people make those big financial decisions, like saving, investing, borrowing, the whole shebang, especially when we're talking about things like retirement plans and mortgages.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at those human quirks, those little things that make us well, us, and how they can sometimes lead us to make financial choices that might not seem, totally logical on paper.
Right, because in the real world, we're not those perfectly rational econs that economists are always talking about.
Right.
So how do these humans, as the articles call us, how do we differ when it comes to money matters?
Well, you can kind of think of econs like Spock from Star Trek. Always logical, weighing every cost and benefit perfectly. Humans, on the other hand, we're a little more like Captain Kirk, letting emotions and gut feelings sometimes steer the ship.
Gotcha. So how does that actually play out in, our everyday financial lives?
Well, take the example of buying a car versus taking a taxi. The sources point out that say, $10,000 price tag of the car, that feels abstract and distant. While that taxi meter ticking away right there in front of you, that's a constant, tangible reminder of the cost. Even though the car might actually be cheaper over time, that immediate pain of the taxi fare, that can really sway our decisions.
Yeah. It's almost like we're wired to prioritize what feels urgent, even if it's not the best choice long term.
Right.
This kind of reminds me of another concept from the sources, the power of defaults.
Yeah.
It seems like something so simple, but it can really influence our behavior, right?
Oh, absolutely. Defaults totally tap into our natural tendency towards inertia.
Mm.
We like to stick with what's familiar, what's easy, what the sources call a heuristic. Think about magazine subscriptions. Lots of people end up subscribed for years to publications they barely even glance at, just because they forget to cancel that automatic renewal.
Oh, yeah. I've got a stack of gardening magazines. I swear I'll get around to reading someday. But speaking of defaults, the article has also brought up some controversial examples like school sharing student information with military recruiters.
Yeah, the whole opt-in versus opt-out debate,
Right.
whether parents have to actively consent to sharing information or actively refuse it, it can make a huge difference in how many students' information ends up with recruiters. It shows how defaults aren't neutral. They come with ethical considerations too.
Yeah, it seems like even these seemingly simple choices, they can have a much bigger impact than we realize. Another thing that struck me was the idea of required choice, like when a software installation makes you select your preferences before you can proceed. It's kind of brilliant in a way. No more blindly clicking next, next, next till it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely combats that inertia, but it's not always the most user-friendly approach,
Yeah.
especially for really simple choices. Like, imagine being forced to choose paper or plastic at the grocery store when all you want is to grab your milk and go. Sometimes a sensible default really is all we need.
That's a great point. So defaults can be super powerful, but it seems like good design also anticipates that, we humans, we're not perfect. We make mistakes, sometimes predictable ones even.
Exactly. Well-designed systems account for human error. Like the Parisian subway tickets. Those are a perfect example from the sources. The ticket machines are designed to accept them face up or face down.
Okay.
It makes it easier for, forgetful tourists to avoid those frustrating, did I do this wrong
It's
moments.
like they're saying, hey, we know you're probably distracted by the beauty of Paris, so, we got you covered.
Right.
And what about that everyday example of the gas cap attached to the car? It's like so obvious, but it prevents a really common mistake.
Brilliant, isn't it? A simple design tweak that saves so many drivers from that, oh no, did I leave it at the gas station?
Mm.
Panic. But what's even more fascinating are those post-completion errors, the things we forget to do after the main task is done.
You mean like leaving your ATM card in the machine?
Exactly.
I've done that more times than I care to admit.
It happens to the best of us. And that's where forcing functions come in. Like withdrawing cash requires you to remove your card first. The design itself forces you to complete the task correctly.
It's like a built-in reminder system, but like in the physical world. Okay, so far we've talked about how our brains can kind of lead us astray sometimes, but what about when it comes to, something as important as saving for retirement? The sources painted a pretty bleak picture of Americans' saving habits.
It is concerning. Like that statistic from 2005 showing a negative personal savings rate in the U.S., that was a real wake-up call. It means people were actually spending more than they were earning.
Yeah.
And, the shift from defined benefit to defined contribution retirement plans, that adds another layer of complexity.
So instead of those traditional pensions based on years of service, now it's up to individuals to figure out how much to save and where to invest it. No
Exactly.
wonder people are struggling.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility.
Mm.
And the sources point out that, even when people know they should be saving more, they often don't take action. It's a classic intention-action gap. But that also means there's an opportunity for nudges to step in and help.
Okay, so what kind of nudges can help people, bridge that gap and start saving more for retirement?
Well, one very effective nudge is automatic enrollment in 401k plans. Remember the power of defaults. A study by Madrian and Shea found that when employees were automatically enrolled, unless they opted out, participation rates jumped from 20% to a whopping 90%.
Wow. So instead of having to actively choose to save, people are basically saving by default, unless they make a conscious effort to opt out.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift, but it leverages our natural tendency towards inertia to encourage positive financial behavior. And there are other approaches too, like forced choosing, where employees are required to make a decision about their retirement savings, even if it's just choosing a default option. It eliminates that "I'll deal with it later" mentality.
So no more procrastinating on retirement planning.
Right.
And I remember the sources also talked about simplifying enrollment forms, which seems like a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Those quick enrollment cards that just require a check mark or two, those can significantly reduce the perceived effort and intimidation factor. Anything to make it easier and less daunting.
Right, because who wants to wade through pages of complicated forms after a long day of work? Now, for those who are already enrolled in a retirement plan but maybe not saving enough, the articles highlighted this program called Save More Tomorrow. This one seems particularly clever because it taps into some pretty deep-seated psychological principles.
It does. 5 key principles, in fact. And it starts with the recognition that people often have good intentions about saving, but they struggle with follow-through.
I think we can all relate to that.
Right.
It's easy to say, oh, I'll start saving more next month, but then next month rolls around and,
Yeah.
well.
Exactly. So Save More Tomorrow addresses this by having people commit to saving more in the future, like when they get their next raise, for example. It's easier to make a commitment about future money than to cut back on your current spending.
So it's like saying, I'll start my diet next week. Classic procrastination. But why is committing to save more in the future so effective?
Well, 2 more principles come into play here: loss aversion and money illusion. We humans, we hate to see our paychecks decrease, even if it's going towards our own savings. So by linking the savings increase to a future raise, it feels less like a loss. And then there's money illusion, which means we tend to focus on nominal dollar amounts rather than the actual purchasing power of our money.
So a $50 loss today feels more painful than a $50 loss 10 years from now, even though inflation means that $50 in the future will be worth less.
Exactly. And finally, the beauty of Save More Tomorrow is that inertia works in favor of saving. Once you're enrolled, those automatic increases just keep happening, and you effortlessly save more and more without feeling the pinch.
You're on autopilot, but in a good way.
Right.
The articles mention some impressive results from this program.
Oh, absolutely. Like in one of the first implementations of Save More Tomorrow at a manufacturing firm, savings rates nearly quadrupled. It shows how understanding human behavior can lead to some really innovative solutions.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've covered saving, but let's move on to investing. This is where things get really complicated, right? Even the sources made it clear that navigating the world of stocks and bonds, that can be incredibly challenging, even for experts.
It definitely can be. Think about it. Even Nobel laureate Harry Markowitz, a pioneer in modern portfolio theory, even he admitted to using a simple 50-50 stock-bond split for his own retirement investments.
Wow. If a genius like him goes for simplicity, maybe that's a sign we should all try to avoid overthinking it. But seriously, what makes investing so tricky? Especially for us non-geniuses.
Well, there's the fundamental risk-return trade-off. Higher potential returns typically come with higher risk, and figuring out the right balance for your individual circumstances, that can be daunting. Then there's asset allocation, deciding how to spread your investments across different asset classes, like stocks, bonds, and real estate.
It's enough to make your head spin. And the articles pointed out that, our human biases, they don't exactly help us make rational investment decisions.
Unfortunately not. Okay. We're often swayed by recent market performance, which can lead to that classic buy high, sell low behavior. One study from Vanguard showed how new participants in their retirement plans, they tended to shift their stock allocations based on how the market had been doing. basically chasing returns instead of sticking to a long-term strategy.
So we get caught up in the excitement of a bull market and pile in just as things are about to cool down, or we panic and sell at the bottom when we should be buying. That's not a recipe for success.
Not at all. And then there's the one heuristic, which is a fancy way of saying that we tend to split our investments evenly across the options available, regardless of whether that makes sense from a portfolio perspective.
So, like, if someone's retirement plan offers, say, 10 different mutual funds, they might just put 10% of their money in each fund, even if those funds overlap significantly or don't align with their risk tolerance.
Precisely. It's a simple rule of thumb, but it can lead to suboptimal asset allocation. Like one study found that when participants were given a set amount to invest across different funds, they tended to divide it equally, even when it resulted in portfolios that didn't match their stated investment goals.
It seems like our brains are always looking for shortcuts, even when those shortcuts lead us down the wrong path. And speaking of risky investments, the sources really emphasize the dangers of putting too much faith in company stock.
It's a lesson many people have learned the hard way, unfortunately. Like, the article told this heartbreaking story of Charlie Presswood, an Enron employee, who lost his entire retirement savings because it was all tied up in Enron stock.
That's a stark reminder of why diversification is so important. But why do people fall into the trap of overinvesting in their own company's stock?
Well, it's partly emotional. People get caught up in the excitement of their company's success and believe it's a sure thing. They might also feel a sense of loyalty to their employer and want to show their support.
Hmm.
But the problem is, even the most successful companies can face unexpected challenges. And if your entire nest egg is tied to one company's fate, you're taking a huge gamble.
It's like putting all your eggs in one basket and hoping for the best, but then the basket breaks and you're left with nothing. And the sources said that a lot of people mistakenly believe company stock is as safe as a money market fund, which couldn't be further from the truth.
That's a dangerous misconception. Company stock is still a single stock, subject to all the ups and downs of the market. Just because you work for the company doesn't make it any less risky.
So what can be done to encourage people to diversify their retirement savings and avoid, putting all their eggs in one basket?
Well, one solution proposed in the articles is a nudge called Sell More Tomorrow. It's based on the same principles as Save More Tomorrow, but instead of gradually increasing savings contributions, it involves gradually selling off company stock and reinvesting the proceeds in a more diversified portfolio.
So it's a way to nudge people towards diversification without causing a sudden drop in their company's stock price or triggering a huge tax bill.
Exactly. It's a clever way to address both the psychological and practical barriers to diversification. And it highlights how nudges can be applied not just to encourage saving, but also to promote smarter investment decisions.
Okay, so we've navigated the often turbulent waters of saving and investing, but now let's dive into another financial challenge that can feel like a maze: the mortgage market.
It's definitely become more complex over the years. Remember those simple 30-year fixed-rate mortgages our parents used to talk about? Those days seem long gone.
Right. Now there are fixed rate, variable rate, interest-only loans, adjustable rate mortgages. It's enough to make anyone's head spin. And the sources pointed out that even the Truth in Lending Act, or Regulation Z, which was designed to make comparing loans easier, it's not really up to the task anymore.
It's true. Regulation Z used to be fairly straightforward. Just look for the lowest APR and you're good to go.
Yep.
But the market has exploded with all sorts of new and exotic mortgage products, making it much harder to compare apples to apples.
And don't forget about all those fees, points, and prepayment penalties that can be hidden in the fine print. No wonder even MBA students struggle to understand the intricacies of the mortgage market, as one study revealed.
Yeah, it's a high-stakes decision with long-term consequences, and the complexity can be overwhelming. Plus, the research from Susan Woodward, she highlighted some disturbing disparities in mortgage costs.
She found that African American and Latino borrowers often end up paying more,
Right.
as do those in less educated neighborhoods. It's almost like the system is rigged against certain groups.
It definitely raises concerns about fairness and equal access to affordable financing. And her research also showed that loans made by mortgage brokers tend to be more expensive than those from direct lenders. Perhaps because brokers have an incentive to steer borrowers towards loans with higher fees that benefit them personally.
It's troubling to think that people who are already struggling financially might be taken advantage of in this complex market. So, with all this complexity and potential for unfairness, what can be done to make the mortgage market more transparent and accessible for everyone?
Well, the articles propose this really interesting idea called a recap system for mortgages. It's inspired by the Truth in Lending Act, but it's designed to be more comprehensive and user-friendly in today's market.
Okay, tell me more about this recap system. How would it work?
The idea is that lenders would be required to report all the costs of mortgage in two simple categories: fees and interest. No more hiding the true costs in a jumble of confusing numbers and fine print.
That sounds so much clearer. So borrowers could easily compare loans from different lenders and see which one truly offers the best deal, without having to decipher a mountain of paperwork.
Exactly. And to take a step further, the recap system would also include a machine-readable report that provides all the detailed information about the loan. This would allow independent third parties like financial advisors or consumer advocacy groups to analyze and compare different mortgage options and help borrowers make informed decisions.
It's like having a financial translator
Right.
who can cut through all the jargon and present the information in a way that, everyone can understand. It sounds like a really promising solution to bring more transparency and fairness to the mortgage market.
It definitely has the potential to empower borrowers and help them navigate this complex landscape. And, the principles behind recaps and simplicity, transparency, ease of comparison, those could be applied to other areas of consumer finance as well.
You're talking about things like student loans and credit cards. The articles briefly touched upon those, and it seems like they share some similarities with the mortgage market in terms of, complexity and potential pitfalls for borrowers.
Absolutely. Like, take student loans. The articles mentioned those misleading marketing tactics that target students with promises of easy money and low monthly payments.
Uh-huh.
Remember that ridiculous pizza delivery loan comparison?
Oh, yeah, as if taking on tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt is as casual as ordering a pizza.
Right.
It preys on young people's inexperience and excitement about going to college, making it seem like debt is no big deal.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of credit card debt. Those statistics on how much credit card debt Americans are carrying, those are pretty sobering. It seems like a lot of people are struggling to manage their credit card use and avoid falling into a cycle of high-interest debt.
It's so easy to swipe that card and tell yourself you'll pay it off later. But then, those minimum payments add up, the interest keeps accruing, and suddenly you're trapped.
It's a vicious cycle. And the way credit card statements are often designed, it doesn't exactly help. They can be really confusing and make it hard to see the true cost of carrying a balance.
So what can be done to help people make more informed decisions about credit cards and avoid falling into those debt traps?
Well, the articles proposed applying the recap system to credit cards, too.
Oh, interesting.
Imagine receiving a credit card statement that clearly lays out all the fees and interest charges, along with a side-by-side comparison of different repayment options and their long-term costs.
It'd be like having a personal finance advisor built right into your credit card statement. Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's shift gears one last time and talk about a real-world example of choice architecture in action, the Swedish Social Security privatization plan.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case study with valuable lessons about the potential and the pitfalls of giving people more choices. Sweden took a bold pro-choice approach, offering citizens a vast array of investment options and actively encouraging them to select their own portfolios.
It was like a smorgasbord of funds, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of options to choose from. But did they also offer a default fund for those who, didn't want to wade through all those choices?
They did, and they designed it carefully, aiming to create a solid, well-diversified option for those who preferred to take a more hands-off approach. But they didn't stop there. They launched a massive advertising campaign urging people to choose their own portfolios rather than simply sticking with the default.
So it seems like they really wanted people to engage with the decision and take ownership of their retirement savings, not just passively accept whatever the government had chosen for them.
Exactly. It was all about empowering individuals and promoting financial literacy. But here's where things get interesting. The articles revealed that as the government's advertising campaign faded, people actually became less likely to choose their own portfolios and more likely to stick with the default option.
Wait, so even when given all these choices and actively encouraged to make their own decisions, people ultimately gravitated towards the default? That's kind of unexpected.
It is. It suggests that the initial high rate of active choice, that was partly driven by the nudge of the advertising campaign itself. When left to their own devices, without that external push, many people defaulted back to the default, even though it wasn't necessarily the best choice for their individual circumstances.
So it seems like choice overload can be a real issue, even when the choices are supposedly good for us.
It certainly highlights the complexity of human decision-making. We crave choice, we crave autonomy, but too much choice can be overwhelming and lead us to make suboptimal decisions. It's like standing in front of a wall of cereal boxes at the grocery store. Sometimes you just wish someone would point you towards a decent option and save you the agony of having to choose.
I think we've all been there. And the Swedish experience shows that even with the best intentions, maximizing choice doesn't always lead to the best outcomes. So it seems like designing a good default option is crucial, even if we're trying to encourage people to make active choices.
Absolutely. The default becomes a safety net, a fallback for those who are either overwhelmed by the choices or just don't have the time or expertise to make informed decisions. And it underscores that choice architecture isn't just about offering more options. It's about carefully crafting those options and designing the context in which those choices are made.
Okay, that brings us to the end of part one of our deep dive into behavioral economics and choice architecture. We've covered a lot of ground, from the quirks of human decision-making to the power of defaults and the challenges of navigating these complex financial decisions.
And we started to explore how understanding these principles can help us design better systems and make smarter choices in our own lives.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of behavioral economics. Picking up where we left off, exploring those fascinating human quirks and how they kind of play out in our financial lives.
Yeah. We ended part one talking about that Swedish Social Security privatization plan, that whole smorgasbord of investment options.
Right. And that surprising finding that as the government's advertising about choosing your own portfolio waned, people became more likely to just stick with the default fund.
Yeah, really highlighted how even when given tons of choices, a well-designed default, that can be incredibly powerful.
It's true.
And that sometimes too much choice can actually lead to decision paralysis,
Yeah.
even when it comes to something as important as retirement savings.
Speaking of choices with big implications, the sources also delved into organ donation, an area where quite literally the right choice can save lives.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic, but one where understanding behavioral economics can have a really profound impact.
Yeah. We're all familiar with those explicit consent systems where, people have to actively sign up to be organ donors,
Right.
often, by checking a box on their driver's license application
Yeah.
or registering online.
Right.
But the sources highlighted presumed consent systems, which kind of flipped that script completely.
Yeah. With presumed consent, you're considered an organ donor unless you specifically opt out.
So it shifts that default, right, from non-donation to donation, taking advantage of, again, our tendency towards inertia.
Exactly. And the data shows that these presumed consent systems, they tend to have, significantly higher donation rates.
Makes sense. I mean, lots of people, they support organ donation in principle, but they never get around to actually registering.
Right.
It's another example of how a simple change in the choice architecture, in this case, that default setting, it can lead to dramatically different outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I imagine there are, some ethical concerns about presumed consent, right? I mean, assuming someone's consent for something is as significant as organ donation, that feels a bit tricky.
It's definitely a complex issue with valid arguments on both sides. Some people argue that presumed consent violates individual autonomy, that people should have to actively choose rather than having a choice made for them.
Right, right. It's a thought-provoking debate. When does a nudge become too strong? When does it cross the line from encouraging a choice to kind of imposing it?
Yeah, it's a question worth pondering. And
Right.
and the sources also mentioned a third approach, mandated choice, where you're required to make a decision.
Okay.
No more passively accepting or rejecting the default. You're forced to confront the question head on.
So it could be like built into the driver's license application process. You can't get your license without indicating your organ donation preference.
Right, exactly.
That would certainly spark a lot of dinner table conversations. But it's another example of how understanding, human behavior and choice architecture can lead to creative solutions, even for these complex ethical dilemmas.
Absolutely.
Now let's shift gears from organ donation to a topic that impacts all of us, saving the planet.
Yeah. It can seem like this monumental task,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But the sources suggest that behavioral economics, it can play a role in nudging people towards, more sustainable behaviors.
Absolutely.
We're not talking about grand gestures here,
Right.
but rather those everyday choices that when, multiplied across millions of people, they can really add up and have an impact.
Like reducing energy consumption or making more environmentally friendly purchases.
Exactly. One powerful nudge highlighted in the articles is social comparison.
Oh, okay. So like showing people how their energy use stacks up against their neighbors.
Precisely. Studies have shown that, we're social creatures. We tend to adjust our behavior when we see how we compare to others.
It's like those fitness trackers that show you like how many steps your friends are taking. A little friendly competition can be motivating.
Exactly. And it can tap into that desire to be seen as responsible citizens, those who care about the environment.
And speaking of appearances, the articles also they mention the importance of framing. How we present information that can really influence choices.
Yeah. For example, emphasizing the potential losses associated with not conserving energy. That might be more effective than just highlighting the gains.
So instead of saying you could save $50 a year by using energy efficient light bulbs, you might say you're losing $50 a year by sticking with those old incandescent bulbs.
Precisely. It plays on our aversion to loss. We tend to be more motivated by, avoiding pain than by seeking pleasure.
Makes sense. It's like that old saying, you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. But in this case, we might catch more energy savers with the threat of higher bills than with the promise of smaller ones.
Right. And of course, it's crucial to make those sustainable choices easy
Yeah.
and convenient.
Yeah. That's where things like readily accessible recycling bins, convenient public transportation,
Hmm.
and clearly labeled energy efficient products, that's where those come in.
Exactly. Reduce that friction, make it the path of least resistance, and people are much more likely to make that sustainable choice.
What about feedback? The sources talked about how providing people with information about their environmental impact that can be really effective.
Yeah, those smart meters that show you your real-time energy usage are a great example.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
Makes it much more tangible. You can actually see the immediate impact
Yeah.
of turning off lights or unplugging devices.
Yeah, yeah. It turns those abstract concepts of kilowatt hours and carbon footprints into, something concrete, something relatable.
Right. Exactly. Okay, from saving the planet, let's zoom in a bit. To a more personal level, our own health and well-being.
Yeah. Another area where behavioral economics can offer, some valuable insights
Yeah.
and some practical tools.
Absolutely. We all know we should eat healthy, exercise regularly, get enough sleep. But knowing and doing are two different things.
Absolutely.
But the good news is these nudges, they can help bridge that gap.
Right.
Make it a little easier to turn those good intentions into healthy habits.
They can.
So it's not just about willpower.
Yeah.
We can actually we can design our environments to make healthy choices more appealing.
Exactly. The sources highlighted the use of defaults in promoting healthy eating.
Okay, like making the healthy option the default choice in a cafeteria or a vending machine.
Precisely. Studies have shown that people are more likely to just, choose whatever's presented as the default.
Yeah.
Even if it's, simply a matter of placement
Mhm.
or presentation.
Yeah. That power of inertia again. We tend to stick with what's easy and familiar.
Right. And the sources also mention, the effectiveness of incentives.
Okay. So rewarding people for making healthy choices.
Exactly. It could be, discounts on gym memberships,
Yeah.
lower insurance premiums for non-smokers, or even financial rewards for achieving certain health goals.
It's like those cashback reward programs on credit cards, but for healthy behaviors.
Right. Exactly. It taps into our natural, desire for rewards, and it can, provide that extra motivation to stick with those healthy habits.
And framing plays a role here as well, right?
Yeah.
How we present information about health that can influence people's, perceptions and choices.
Absolutely. For example, emphasizing the positive health outcomes
Yeah.
of exercise, like, increased energy, improved mood.
Mm-hmm.
That might be more effective than just focusing on, on weight loss.
Right. Right. It's about finding that message that really resonates with people on an emotional level. Absolutely.
And just like with sustainable behaviors, making healthy choices easy and accessible, that's key.
Yeah, absolutely.
So having healthy snacks, readily available, making it easy to sign up for a gym membership, or offering convenient options for cooking healthy meals at home.
Exactly. It's about removing those barriers, right? Make the healthy choice, the path of least resistance.
And don't forget about the power of feedback. Those fitness trackers that show you your daily steps, your sleep patterns, your heart rate. Those can be surprisingly motivating.
Absolutely. It's about providing people with personalized information about their progress. Makes it easier to track their achievements and stay engaged with their health goals.
Okay, from individual health, let's broaden our scope again. Let's look at how behavioral economics can inform public policy. Yeah, it's a fascinating area
Mm.
where these insights can help us design more effective and more human-centered policies.
Absolutely. The sources discussed a wide range of applications, from encouraging retirement savings to promoting energy conservation to improving medication adherence.
Yeah, yeah, it's about recognizing that people aren't always perfectly rational actors,
Right.
and designing policies that work with human nature, not against it.
So instead of assuming everyone will, carefully weigh the costs and benefits of every decision, we acknowledge that people are influenced by emotions, by biases.
By social norms.
Exactly. And we use that understanding, right, to nudge people towards choices that are in their best interests and benefit society as a whole.
The classic example, of course, is automatic enrollment in retirement savings
All right.
plans.
It's a simple but incredibly effective nudge that has, significantly increased participation rates.
By shifting that default from non-enrollment
Yeah.
to enrollment,
Wow.
we harness the power of inertia to encourage saving.
And the sources also discuss, the strategic use of incentives in public policy,
Absolutely.
like offering tax breaks for contributing to retirement accounts, or providing subsidies for purchasing energy efficient appliances.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about making that desired behavior more more financially attractive, right? Providing a tangible reward for making choices that benefit both the individual and society.
Right. Yeah. And once again, framing plays a crucial role.
Absolutely.
How we present policy options can significantly influence public perception and support.
It can.
Like
Yeah.
emphasizing the long-term benefits of investing in renewable energy rather than just focusing on the upfront costs.
Right, exactly. It's about crafting a narrative that really resonates with people's values and aspirations.
But amidst all this talk about nudges and choice architecture, it's important to remember the ethical considerations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we're using these tools responsibly
Yeah.
and not crossing the line into manipulation or coercion.
Right. The sources emphasize the importance of transparency.
Yeah.
People should be aware that they're being nudged, right?
Right.
And understand the rationale behind it.
Absolutely.
It's about respecting their autonomy, right?
Yeah.
And not trying to trick them into making certain choices.
Right. And we should, always base our nudges on solid evidence,
Yeah.
not just hunches or good intentions.
Right.
It's about ensuring that these interventions are truly effective in achieving the desired outcomes.
And we must avoid coercion, right?
Right.
Nudges should gently guide people, not force them into making certain choices.
Absolutely.
It's a delicate balance, but one that's crucial to maintain.
Yeah. Ultimately, we want to empower people
Yeah.
to make choices that are in their best interests.
Yeah.
While also promoting the well-being of society as a whole.
Okay, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive.
Yeah, we've explored how behavioral economics can be applied to a really wide range of areas, from organ donation to sustainability to health to public policy.
Right.
And we've delved into the ethical considerations that guide the responsible use of nudges and choice architecture. Part 3 will bring it all together. Reflecting on the key takeaways from our deep dive and exploring how we can harness these insights to create a better world.
Absolutely. Until then, keep those mental gears turning. And happy deep diving.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into behavioral economics and choice architecture.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground from those human quirks to those defaults and how powerful they are.
And we've looked at how those insights, how we can apply them to everything from saving for retirement to encouraging organ donation to, even designing public policy.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has.
So as we wrap things up, let's take a step back,
Yeah.
and think about what we've learned.
One of the biggest takeaways for me is that we're not always as in control of our decisions as we think.
Okay.
All those biases and mental shortcuts, those subconscious things, they can really steer us off course
Right.
without us even realizing it.
We like to think of ourselves as these rational people making decisions carefully,
Uh-huh.
weighing the pros and cons.
But the reality is we're often influenced by things we're not even aware of.
Mm.
Emotions, gut feelings, those ingrained habits,
Mhm.
they all play a role,
Yeah.
even when we think we're being logical.
It's like there's a hidden autopilot guiding our behavior, and sometimes that autopilot, well, it doesn't always make the best decisions for us.
Right.
But the good news is, by understanding these subconscious influences, we can start to take back control.
Absolutely. Awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
Once we shine a light on those hidden biases and shortcuts, we can
Uh-huh.
start to anticipate them
Yeah.
and make more deliberate choices.
Right.
It's like learning the rules of the game
Yeah.
so we can outsmart ourselves.
Right. And speaking of a rule, one of the most powerful rules we've talked about is those defaults.
Oh, yeah.
It seems so simple, but those preset options, they really can impact our behavior.
They really can. Defaults tap into our tendency for inertia. That inclination to just stick with what's familiar and what's easy. I mean, think about it. How many times have you just clicked next or agree
Mm.
without even really, never really thinking about it?
More times than I care to admit. But knowing that defaults can be so influential, I mean, we can actually use that to our advantage, right?
Right.
We can choose defaults that align with our goals, whether it's, saving money, eating healthy, even
Yeah.
becoming an organ donor.
Exactly. And when we encounter defaults that don't serve us well, we can make that effort to opt out
Yeah.
and choose something different.
Yeah. It's about taking a moment to pause and ask, is this really what I want? Or am I just going with the flow?
Right. Exactly.
And that simple act of questioning, that can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it brings us to another key concept we've been exploring, nudges.
Yeah.
These gentle pushes can steer us towards better decisions without restricting our freedom of choice.
They recognize that we're not perfect.
Right.
We're complex. We've got emotions and biases,
Mhm.
social norms.
It's like they're saying, hey, we get it. You're human. Let's work with it.
Yeah.
And we've seen how effective they can be
Yeah.
in so many areas. Retirement savings, energy conservation, even medication adherence.
It's really it's fascinating to see how a little bit of behavioral science can go such a long way
Right?
in designing environments that actually support us
Yeah.
and what we want to do.
But we can't forget about the ethical considerations, right? Like
Right.
nudges should be about, empowering people, not manipulating them.
Right.
Transparency is key.
Yeah.
People need to know that they're being nudged
Yeah.
and understand why.
Absolutely. And nudges should never be coercive.
Yeah.
They should guide, not force.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah. But it's one we need to maintain.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty optimistic.
Me too.
It's empowering to know that we can actually design the world around us
Yeah.
to make it easier to make good choices.
Absolutely.
Not just for ourselves, but for everything.
the society as a whole.
It's like we're all architects in a way, shaping the environments that influence our choices, our destinies even.
Right.
And with a little bit of knowledge and a lot of creativity, I think we can design a world where the easy choice is also the best choice.
Yeah. It's an inspiring thought.
It really is. So as we as we come out of this deep dive, let's take these insights with us, you know?
Yeah.
Let's think about the choices we're making, the defaults that we just accept, the nudges that we encounter. Let's
Yeah.
use this knowledge to, to make better decisions,
Yeah.
not just for ourselves, but for everyone, for the world around
That's
us.
right.
And let's keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep nudging ourselves and each other towards a better future.
I love it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into behavioral economics and choice architecture.
Until next time, happy deep diving.